Hey, what's up? Jeff Ratcliffe here. Every year, fantasy football, NFL players go bust. It's unfortunate, but it definitely happens. Sometimes these busts, they can be out of left field, catch everybody by surprise. Other times, though, the writing is on the wall in the preseason. We just have to be smart enough to read that writing. And when you look at this year's candidates, I think there are 9 players, and some of them are pretty darn big-name players, who stand out as bust candidates for 2019 fantasy football. So let's dive into these guys. I want to start at the quarterback position, and I'll go with the low-hanging fruit here. Andrew Luck has to be on this list, and it's not a matter of skill with Luck, so don't at me, Colts fans. I think Luck is phenomenal. It's just the simple fact of the matter is we don't know what's going on entirely with this injury. The Colts have told us a little bit, and it seems like every day that goes by, we hear a little bit more that he could potentially miss time, that he may miss the first week, that he might miss even more time than that. That is scary for fantasy purposes, especially when this is a guy who just a season ago in 2017 missed the entire year because of an injury. So if you spend an earlier pick on Andrew Luck, you could have a bust on your hands. Certainly there's a lot of upside with him, but he is a bust candidate. Now we'll go with another name, non-injury related, also at the quarterback position, in Drew Brees. Now, hey, the days where Drew Brees was a 5,000-yard passer, it seemed like every year, they're in the rearview mirror. It's a different Saints offense. They're one of the more run-heavy offenses in the league. We know they're going to run with Alvin Kamara. We know that Latavius Murray is going to be in the mix. We know that offense is going to look generally pretty similar to how it's looked over the last couple seasons, which means there's less meat on the bone for Drew Brees from a passing standpoint. Now, last year, he was a top 10 fantasy quarterback, but here's the problem. He had 6 weeks, where he was in the top 3 among quarterbacks for fantasy scoring. That sounds awesome, right? Well, he also had 9 weeks where he was outside of the top 10. That is not awesome. That is a roller coaster ride, and I expect a lot of the same with Drew Brees. You might think, well, why was that? It's largely game script dependent with Drew Brees, so he's actually now a better best ball quarterback, a better DFS quarterback than he is a regular season-long quarterback, and he is a potential bust candidate for sure this year. Let's move over to the running back position. If you followed me on Twitter at Jeff Ratcliffe, then you probably know I'm not that high on Damian Williams. I'm not as high as the rest of the industry is. I see some people ranking Damian Williams as a RB1, a top 12 guy. I am not there, and in fact, I do think he is a bust candidate for this year. And again, it's not necessarily a knock on him. I think he's much better, much more appropriately ranked to say running back 18 than he is running back 12 or 11 or 10 because of the uncertainty surrounding him. This is a guy whose career high in carries is 50, and he had that last year. And it's easy to look at the end of the season last year and say, wow, he was absolutely lights out down the stretch for the Chiefs. Sure, but we've seen this out of running backs before. Remember, go back, what was that, 2010? James Starks for the Green Bay Packers looked like he was the next coming for that team. He was going to be a fantasy force, and it never really materialized. Now, that's an extreme example, and obviously Williams is in a prime spot, but history has shown that this can happen. When you have fresh running backs at the end of the season, they sometimes look a little bit better than what they are. Now, also, keep in mind, Damian Williams is 27 years old. He's no spring chicken. We have Darwin Thompson there. Carlos Hyde is on that roster. Darrell Williams is there as well. He's far from locked in to be that lead back, so be careful with Damian Williams. Melvin Gordon is a fantasy bust candidate. There's no doubt about it. And the sheer fact here is that Melvin Gordon, he may not play at all this year. We have no idea what's ultimately going to happen with Melvin Gordon. He does, but we don't know. So at this point, he's super risky. I think he's worth taking a risk, but not early in your drafts. You have to look at him maybe 4th round and beyond, which he may not make it that far in your drafts. And the fact of the matter, as I said, is if he does not play, well, you're left wasted with that pick. You completely wasted, got nothing in return for it. That's not good for fantasy purposes. Another fantasy bust candidate, well, again, if you follow me on Twitter and social media, you know Lamar Miller's name was going to have to be on this list. And again, it's not a knock on Miller because he is in a good spot. He is the lead back in a prime offense here, one of the better offenses in the league. It's just a matter of his overall efficiency. This is a guy who's been in that spot before, and in each of the last 3 years, he's only scored a combined 6 touchdowns. Now, that's not combined over that span of time. It's 6 touchdowns each season, but still, that's not a lot of upside. Now, it looked like for a minute he had the opportunity to be a true bell cow, but of course, that all changed when the Texans traded for Duke Johnson. Now it's a different scenario. It's a different opportunity for him in passing downs. There's less work for Lamar Miller and a greater chance for him to be a fantasy bust. Of course, the other name on my list at the running back position is Jordan Howard. Jordan Howard's one of those guys, when you look at the raw stats, you think, this guy's a stud. 1,000+ yards in, each of the last 3 seasons. He's a monster on the ground. But then you look a little bit closer. Last year, yes, over 1,000 rushing yards, but on 250 attempts, he actually averaged just 3.7 yards per. Now, that was in an offense that put him in an advantageous situation 82% of the time. 82% of his carries he ran against sub-package defense, which means there's an extra defensive back or more on the field. That's good for a running back. Despite the advantage, Jordan Howard still averaged 3.7 yards per carry. That is not a good number right there. He also adds almost nothing in the passing game with just 20 catches last year. Now he goes to Philadelphia, though, right? New hope with the Philadelphia Eagles, except one thing. They run the same offense as the Bears, generally speaking. It's almost identical. Can't see how Jordan Howard is a great fit in this offense, and absolutely love Miles Sanders to break out later in the season. So Jordan Howard has fantasy bust potential. Let's go to wide receiver. I have 2 names on my list for wide receiver. The first one is a big one. In fact, a GOAT at the position for fantasy purposes. Antonio Brown. He's got to be on the list after the red flags in the offseason here. The trade alone, the bizarre scenario that happened with the trade. Then you have the frostbite on his feet, which that really happened. Yeah, it did. Then you have him demanding to wear a helmet, losing his grievance, possibly quitting football over it. He's not going to quit football over it, but still, number of red flags there. Plus, not to mention, that's off the field. On the field, he goes from Ben Roethlisberger to Derek Carr. Ben Roethlisberger, who's one of the better deep ball throwers in the league, to Derek Carr, who's consistently been a guy who attempts the fewest deep ball passes in the league. That puts a damper on Antonio Brown's fantasy potential. He's a bust candidate. The other name on my list is Julian Edelman, and I know a lot of people love Julian Edelman. Hey, he was phenomenal last season for the Patriots, especially in the playoffs. But let's be clear about Julian Edelman. He is 33 years old. He almost never makes it through an entire season, it feels like. Last year it was because of suspension. The year before he was hurt. He doesn't get through entire seasons. Now, there's opportunity there in New England. There's no doubt about it. No Gronkowski. You have a young cast of wide receivers other than Edelman, so he could see a lot of targets. But my concern isn't that. It's whether or not he's going to hold up at 33 years old to all that heavy workload here this season. So very much a bust candidate. And I got one for you at tight end. Again, it's a little bit low-hanging fruit here, but Eric Ebron is primed for regression this season. He was a monster last year. We finally got the breakout, and credit where credit's due to Eric Ebron, but it may have been unsustainable production. I mean, you're talking about a guy who saw 18 end zone targets last year that was tied for second in the league. Only Antonio Brown saw more. Second in the league, not second among tight ends. And he converted 10 of those 18 for touchdowns. That number almost invariably goes down the following year. Not to mention the fact that this is a team that did bring in Devin Funchess, who could be a red zone presence. Oh yeah, and Andrew Luck is a little bit banged up heading into the season. Eric Ebron, a bust candidate, unfortunately, at the tight end position. You want to check out where these guys land in our fantasy rankings, check out their fantasy projections, and a whole lot more. You can do that at PFF.com.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.